Okay, so in this lesson what we're going to do is we're going to look at cameras. So if we now go to our camera tab up here, which you can get to Windows, Project and then Cameras, it'll appear here. You'll notice that we've got a lot of cameras in here. Now these cameras came across when I imported the Maya file. So I don't actually need them. So I'm actually going to select this one and I'm going to delete these ones out so we can start fresh. Okay, good. Right, so I'm back on the free camera. Now what I want to do is add a camera. So I'm going to call this camera perspective 1. Okay. And that's good. And I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to get my angle. Well, that looks very cool. And also I can change my distance, the azimuth or the angle and the inclination, twist, and I can also select my whether it's perspective or orthographic, so it's straight on or it's perspective. I can change my focal length, as you can see there, and you'll see the field of view is actually changing. You can turn a grid on as well, so you can see the ground grid, and you can click this so it'll stay above the ground. Okay, so it won't let you go under the ground. It'll just force you to stay on top, which is quite a handy thing to leave on. Okay, now once you've set your angle and you like your angle, just hit the save button here and that will save that view out. Now if I create a new camera and we call this one perspective 2, like that. Okay, I'm in that camera, and if I turn around here to this view, say for instance on the other side, and also say for argument's sake I wanted to get rid of this little grill, come into the scene here, just click that little grill, come into the scene. I could turn it off this side so that I'm able to see this box here, come back into the camera, and I could save that view. So now I can jump between these different views. Or I can go across to this view. By the way, turning that grid off doesn't mean that it's gonna come back when we actually go to that view. But when we do our render setups, you'll see you can set custom views up. So what you can do is you can go into view 2, you can hit the save button, you can come into there, so you can jump between the cameras. So you can set as many cameras up as you want. So let me just set one more up, just to set our top view, and just do a top. And for this view, we're going to have this kind of shot, I think. Something like that. I'm going to save that in there. And now we can jump between all these views easily. So that's how to set up custom things. Now if you do move this and you don't save it, when you next do that it will check back to what it was before it was saved. So if you want to be able to zoom around the model, I do suggest you pick the free camera and you just move around, and then when you want to jump back into one of these, you can just click it and jump back. Okay, just a little bit of advice there. Okay, and as I said, you can change the perspective, the focal length, the field of view. So they're all cool. You can also set a depth of field limit, which is what we're going to use because we're going to generate a depth of field. So you can select a focal point for that depth of field as well. So we'll set that up now. I'm going to go into perspective shot 1. Now I do want this to be in focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select depth of field. I'm going to set the distance. You can see this is already blurring. I'm actually going to go in here. I'm going to click this picture here and I'm going to click done. And now you'll see this background is blurring, but this piece here that we just moused over and clicked is sharp. Okay, and that's per camera. So if I change into this camera, this is now turned off. So I'd have to reset it for here. So once again, I'm going to go in here. And in this case, I'm going to select this back piece. So now you'll see that the back piece will be sharp and this front piece will be blurred. So let me just set that here. You can see that sharpened up, and click done. Now this will be blurred and this will be sharp, and you can also set it up here to set the amount of blurring like that. Bring the distance down, it will be really blurred. Okay, so very cool, and it's per camera thing, so this one I'll leave off. I won't put any depth of field on this one. Okay, so that's a look at the cameras. So in the next lesson what we'll do is we'll look at actually the render settings and output. Okay, so render settings and output. Now what we want to do is we want to render 3 images out. These images are all going to be different. We're going to, on some of these we've got depth of field turned on. Actually I think that's turned itself off for some reason. I don't know why. Let's just go in there and reset the depth of field on this particular camera. Drop this focal left so it's nice and blurred. So I probably have to set it for each one before I do the render. So let's go into render settings. If we go to render, we can go to render here. This will bring the render options box up. Now within this box we can tell Keyshot where to render to. So what we're going to do is I'm going to render to my desktop temporarily. Actually I'll render to my headphones folder inside here. Okay, and I'm just going to select that as a folder. I'm now going to tell it the resolution that I want it to print at. In this case I'm going to make this about 2000, yeah, and it will do it in Pro across here as well, so it's a 2000 width render. I'm going to output this as a PSD file, okay, and I want to include the alpha so it's easy for me to cut it out. Okay, so that's my settings in there. This stuff you can leave the same. You can use a real-time render using all 8 cores or the default mode, which I'm going to leave. And I'm going to go into quality now, and in the samples you can crank this up as high as you want. You can go advanced controls if you want to. So I generally can leave it on this. Sometimes I'll put it on 64 just to double it up. You can also set a time for each render. So if you want to, if you're under time constraints and you've got 3 to do in 3 hours, you could set this to 3 hours or 1 hour. So it would do 1 hour per image. Okay, so I'm going to leave it on 64 samples. On the queue we can queue our jobs, and passes I'm going to put depth, geometric normal. Now I don't normally use geometric normal, but I'm going to output it anyway. I'm going to do a clown pass and a render layer, so I'm going to check them all. Okay, so this is all set up now. We've set all those up. Output PSD resolution 2000. Okay, it's saying 300 at that size, at that print size, 6 inches. So there, and we got quality 64 samples. I did it through maximum samples. We haven't set the queue up yet. We haven't set region or network because we're not using those. In passes we've selected all the passes. Okay, so with this all selected now, what we can do is we can add this job. So I'm going to save because it's saying you've made a modification to the HDRI, and that's because we made it blurred. So how would you like to save your changes? I'm just going to save it and click save. Now it's added that to the job. If you go over, you can see it. So now what I can do is I can go to the next camera. So if I go to these cameras here, zoom up, I can go to the next one, which is perspective 1. Well, the depth of field has turned off, so I need to just reset it. So I'm going to just select this and click done, and in the f-stops I'm just going to bring it down a little bit just so that that backs around. You can also set some effects there if you want to do, but I'm happy with this. So all the other settings are the same. Okay, we've left them the same, got all the render passes, and we're going to add this to the queue. So now you'll see that these 2 shots have been set up. Okay, and finally we've got one more render to do, which is the top render. So I'm just going to go and select the top here, okay, which is this one here, and we're just going to add that to the queue, and there it is there. Okay, so all of them will be output with different names to the folder, and they'll have different names here. The quality will be 64. I've got a queue of them. I've got passes, all the passes set up. So now all I need to do, if I've got a queue, is to come into the queue section and process the queue. If you haven't got a queue, you can just hit render here. But I've got a queue, so I'm going to go into the queue and I'm going to process the queue. What will happen now on my other screen is a box has opened up and it will start rendering this out at 64 samples. And KeyShot's really quick compared to other programs. But of course, if you really push up the samples or in the advanced settings, then it's going to take ages. But that's the way that that's the way rendering works. So I'll come back to you when this is rendered out, and we'll have a look at what it's actually processed for us. Okay, so KeyShot has finished now and it's produced these renders out. And you can see there's a series. I've produced 3 lots out. Let's just focus our attention on one of them for now. Let's focus our attention on this blurred one here, the one we did with depth of field. Now we've got 3 ones. We've got the Photoshop file, we've got a clown pass, we've got a depth, and we've got a normal. And these ones are the other renders, which I'm just going to delete out for now. Right, so let's see if we just open the headphones one up and have a look at it. You'll see that it would have produced this image now. It's quite grainy because it was rendered only with 64. So if I give it more time or I give it more samples, the quality will increase. But you can see it's still a very good render. So what I could do is, it's alphaed it already, is inside of my layers in Photoshop, I could just drop a new layer in. Let me just label this one Geo and drag it to the top, and then I could just drop a white in with the photo bucket, and it will automatically, you can see it's put the drop shadows underneath it. Now also what it's rendered out for us is this clown pass. So if I open this up and I select all, come over here, select all, and then I press Ctrl C to copy it, and I copy it into here, Control V, and I just drag it to the top, you'll see that it's actually a copy of that. But what a clown pass is really good for is for masking. So if I wanted to select, say, this area here or this blue, I could select it inside of the clown pass and it would be selected in here, meaning that I could go in and make some changes to it if I wanted to. You see? Really quickly. Now we've created another file. Now this has created a depth pass for us and a normals pass. The normals, I don't tend to use this. It can be useful, but I don't tend to use it. I just thought I'd output it for you, and it's so you can create a kind of normal map from these things. But the one that you could use is the depth. Now if I open this up and we just save it as an alpha, and I just click OK, it would look like it's just white, but these files are EXR files, so they are actually they've got a much wider color range than you can physically see on an RGB monitor. Now I can prove that to you because it looks black and white, but if I go into one of the settings, I go into image and I go to mode, you'll see that it's a 32-bit full floating point image, and that means it contains more image than you can just see. So I can prove it to you by just going into some of the settings. If I go to adjustments and exposure, now let me just expose it down. Watch what will happen. Do you see that? Do you see the difference between this color and this color? And this means that you're able to get very accurate depth of fields based on this depth of field pass. Okay, so you can set up your depth of field under the lens blur and it will be a very accurate blur. Now the problem is that it's already blurred it in the actual image. So what I tend to do is I tend to output a sharp image and then I just manually blur it myself, or I do another export with the blur turned on and I just use that EXR file from the second render that I will have produced. Okay, so that's how I do it. but you know, you might find a use for it yourself. But anyway, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a final high quality render on one of the shots. Just click no. So I'll open this up and I'll just choose this one because I like this image, and I'm going to do a render of this, a much higher quality render for our final lesson in KeyShot 5. So let's go into it. Let's go to output. This time I'm going to set this at 4000. Okay, much bigger. The quality, I'm going to go to maximum time, and this render I'm going to give about 1.5 hours. Okay, and 1 second, why not? No, I'll turn that off. So I'm going to give it 1.5 hours. I'm passes, I don't want a geometric normal, I don't need a depth pass because I'm not going to have depth of field. I'll leave the clown pass on, and I will be exporting this out under output as a PSD file. Okay, and I will be exporting it, at this time I'll export it to my desktop. Okay, so with all those things set, and because I haven't got a queue, from here I can just hit the render button. So I'll see you in the next lesson where I'll show you what it's produced in 1.5 hours.